Harriet wrestled Amelia into the white dress. Amelia's hair clung to the side of her head as dollops of sweat formed at her hairline and trickled to her chin. Her eyes rolled back into her head, revealing milky whites between her lashes for a few moments before her irises flung back into view. Her skin was taut and seemed to stretch across her face to form a smile her mother knew was nothing of the sort. A deep maroon flushed across her cheeks, and her skin radiated like the sun, burning Harriet's hand when it inched too close. "Put your damn hands through the sleeve," Harriet demanded. Amelia twisted and writhed in her mother's arms. "No, I want to wear the red dress, the red one, Mother." Her words, low and demonic, escaped through her clenched teeth like a growl. "We are having company in just a few hours, and no daughter of mine will be seen in a red dress." Amelia twisted into knots as Harriet fought to keep her on the floor. She pulled her legs around her daughter's waist and tightened her thighs. Amelia howled and turned to her stomach, knocking Harriet to her back. She crawled up her mother's torso, and the two sat face to face. "I want to wear the—" She paused between screams to let a belch escape into her mother's face. "Fucking red dress." Just as Harriet's expression evolved from irritation to astonishment, Amelia let out another belch, but this time it was accompanied by a puddle of navy blue vomit that landed on her mother's mouth and chest. Harriet threw her sobbing daughter to the floor, and Amelia slid across the hardwood. "Have you been eating them again?" "No, Mother." "You have." "No, I swear." Harriet reached for the red dress that sat on the nightstand and wiped the vomit from her face. She stood above her cowering daughter and wondered for a moment what life would be like without her. She had decided on bearing a child after Camilla, her best friend of 20-some-odd years, had twins. When she and Timothy wed, she begged him to make her dreams come true. He resisted as long as possible, until Harriet threatened divorce. The divorce seemed unlikely. The two were heirs to a large inheritance, Timothy's family by hard work and dedication, and Harriet's by thievery and betrayal. Timothy always opted to take the path of least resistance and eventually caved. Once Amelia was born, Timothy cried and Harriet phoned Camilla. In moments like these, Harriet often wondered if that phone call was worth all of the trouble this spoiled, ungrateful brat had caused over the past 8 years. Harriet began to frantically open drawers and turn over chairs. Amelia, horrified, pulled herself into fetal position and covered her eyes. When the furniture was overturned and all the contents pulled from within each drawer, Harriet picked up the red dress and searched the pockets. She pulled out a handful of blueberries. "I'm sorry, Mommy, I'm so very sorry," Amelia cried. "Lying little wench! You have been going into the woods, and after I forbid you?" Amelia remained silent. "You continue to eat these? You know they make you sick." "No, please just listen. That's the only way I can see her." "Who?" "My friend, my very best friend." "She isn't real, Amelia. She isn't real." Harriet seethed, grabbing clots of her hair at the temples and pulling. "She is. When I go into the woods and eat the berries, I see her, and we play all day together." "They aren't blueberries, you imbecile. They're poison, just like you." "She tells me to hurt you, Mother." "What did you say?" "But I never have." Harriet dropped the red dress to the floor and threw the handful of berries at her daughter before storming out of the bedroom and slamming the door behind her. Amelia remained crouched as she picked up the tiny balls. Once she had her hands full, she threw a few navy beads into her mouth and chewed. When Timothy arrived home and heard of the intolerable actions of his only child, he raced up to her room to find Amelia weeping on the floor in the white dress her mother had chosen. "What's wrong?" "Daddy, I don't feel well." He bent over and pressed his lips to her forehead. "My God, you're burning up. Go on and lay down. I'll go get your mother." "No, please not her. Anyone but her." "Oh, hush now. It's okay. I'll let her know that you won't make it to dinner." "Is Camilla still coming?" "With the boys and Greg." "But Dad," she protested. "You'll just have to see them next time. Now get some rest." He kissed his daughter's forehead and stomped off to find his wife. Camilla was expected to arrive within the hour, and Harriet was found placing the last of the floral arrangements on the dining room table. The silverware sparkled under the chandelier, and each napkin sat perfectly folded in a triangle atop each plate. Candles were lit around the room and flickered in the reflection of the sliding glass door behind the table. Timothy rolled his eyes at the elaborate display. It looked as if they were having a Thanksgiving meal fit for a king instead of a simple dinner with their oldest friends, but Harriet always put on a show. "Harriet, Amelia is burning up. We should probably call the doctor." "She's just faking it," she hissed. "You can't fake a fever, Harriet. I'm worried it's something serious." "Plus, Camilla will be here any minute. Can't we take care of it tomorrow?" Harriet continued, ignoring the concerned tone surrounding her husband's words. "I think we should move dinner and take her now." "Impossible. I've spent all spring on that garden, and I'll be damned if that abomination of a child will stop Camilla from seeing it." "Harriet, if she's eaten the berries again." Harriet swung around to meet his eyes. "She has done nothing of the sort. It's a simple cold, and she's letting on to get attention. Now, another word of changing our plans, do you understand?" Timothy nodded. We'll keep an eye on her, but if she gets worse, we'll have to do something, and she will not be coming to dinner. She needs her rest." "Just as well," Harriet sighed. "Better a little company than bad." Timothy parted his lips to protest his wife's crude statement, but before he could stand up to her, the doorbell rang. There never was a good time to begin a war, and especially not right before supper. "They're here. Get the door. I'll grab the drinks. Ask if she saw the garden. Ask her first. Make sure she sees the chrysanthemums. Point out the colors, Timothy, and how big the blooms are." Harriet spoke frantically and ran about the kitchen. Camilla and Harriet had been best friends since they were in diapers. Their fathers met at teens on the first day of boot camp in the Army. Their families grew up together, and as a result, so did they. They spent holidays and birthdays with one another. They had countless sleepovers, road trips, and vacations, but with sisterhood came envy. Camilla was the first to walk, the first to make the honor roll, and first to get her driver's license. She had her first kiss first, her first heartbreak, and first car accident before Harriet's. She got engaged, married, and had a child first. Hell, even her parents announced their divorce a year before Harriet's own parents split. Her whole life felt like an everlasting competition, where Camilla was just rounding the corner to the finish line, and Harriet was lying face first in a puddle of mud. But run as she might, the wind was always just out of reach. This was, of course, until last Christmas. She had overheard Camilla gabbing with one of her cousins twice removed about her garden. "I just can't get them to grow, those damn chrysanthemums. They won't take to the soil." Her cousin nodded as they sipped on some cider. And there it was. Since then, Harriet had spent every day in the garden and every night researching how to achieve the perfect chrysanthemums. All spring, she had added compost and fertilizer and checked the pH level of the soil religiously. Finally, on a crisp spring morning, it came time for the seeds. She dug and planted, then pruned and watered until fall, when they exploded like fireworks of yellow, violet, and gold. And after the lights were installed to illuminate the blooms at night, and the walkway was added below the rows of flowers from the sidewalk to the front entrance, she invited Camilla and her family over for supper. Suddenly, frantic Harriet realized she hadn't listened as her husband opened the door. Surely he had mentioned the flowers. He had specific instructions, but what if he didn't talk about the vibrancy or the size? What if he had only mentioned them in passing? Harriet could not muster the thought of all that time wasted. Just in case he hadn't spoken of the flowers up to her standards, and when did he ever live up to her standards in any regard, she would have to mention them once again while they ate. They were impossible to miss, but Harriet knew that sometimes Camilla paid too much attention to those twins and was blind to all else. Harriet sat at the head of the table and sucked up the candle flames like a spotlight. She orchestrated the conversation, carefully avoiding any topics that she could not provide insightful dialogue on. Camilla sat at her side, laughing and grabbing her old friend's hand from time to time. The twins kicked each other under the table as Timothy occupied the head at the other end near the sliding glass door. He and Greg talked amongst themselves until Harriet requested his agreement on a topic, to which he would nod and say, "Yes, dear," and return to his conversation. When the attention strayed too far from Harriet, she would clear her throat until all eyes were on her, and then a new topic would be selected. "I just love chrysanthemums, don't you? They're tricky at first, but once they bloom, it's like nothing you've ever experienced. I've got them all along the path in the front. You did see them when you came up the steps," Harriet asked Camilla, whose gaze deviated from her mid-sentence and now rested in the corner of the room. She had begun to saw her raw meat with a steak knife and froze as soon as her eyes trailed off. "Camilla, have you seen them? I planted them myself, you know. Not even Timothy helped. Isn't that right, Timothy?" With a lack of response, Harriet glanced around the table. All lips fell silent, and all eyes sat in the direction of Camilla's. Harriet slowly turned in her chair and peered through the darkness to see a small figure standing motionless near the fireplace. Low burning embers danced at the feet of the shadow. "Amelia?" Timothy asked, finally breaking the silence. The figure moved like a ghost from the darkness and into the dining room, only illuminated by the soft candlelight, and slowly made it to the table. "So nice of you to join us. I do hope you've watched up before," Harriet began, but gasped as soon as her daughter was at her side. Amelia stood with her hands behind her back. Her feet were firmly planted on the floor, but her body swayed as if unstable. The pupils of her eyes ate away at the sclera until the whites were almost swallowed whole. The life in them had faded and only darkness remained. Deep circles sat on her eyes like brown half-moons. Her hair was slick with sweat and bare hugged her scalp and the sides of her face. She dripped from her pores like a leaking faucet, and the redness that had stretched across her cheeks only hours earlier was now replaced with the palest of whites. "Oh, Amelia," Camilla began. She couldn't think of another word to say. Instead, she pulled her knife from the hunk of meat and laid it on the table beside her. She pulled the napkin from her lap and began dabbing at the child's face with it. "What have you got behind your back?" Harriet scowled. A smile surfaced on Amelia's face, and Harriet winced from its wickedness. Amelia cocked her head to the side as her mother spoke, as if she couldn't recall who the woman was. "I said, what have you got behind your back?" Harriet demanded. Amelia pulled her hands forward and revealed a fistful of yellow chrysanthemums that were torn from the front garden. A clod of dirt clung to the thick roots of the flowers and scattered debris across the floor as Amelia dropped the mound on Harriet's plate. Timothy gasped and pushed back his seat with the back of his thighs. He rose but dared not move. Harriet's face had darkened to a shade of red that he had never before witnessed, and he was worried that if she exploded, he would be struck by the shrapnel. Before anyone could move, before a word could be uttered or a breath taken, Amelia vomited a stream of blue chunks down the front of her white dress. Harriet's eyes flashed with disbelief. "How dare you!" she shouted, and ran the palm of her hand across her daughter's face with a loud slap. She grabbed at the child's wrists, and Amelia fought back with claws and ravenous screeches. "Harriet, stop! Don't grab her like that!" Timothy shouted, a talking statue. Amelia pulled free from her mother's grip and grabbed the knife at Camilla's side. With one foul swoop, she ran the serrated edge across Camilla's neck. Gasps and cries echoed off the walls and forced the light of the candle to dance as if exhilarated by the bloodshed. Camilla reached out toward Harriet, who now had both hands across her mouth, her eyes wide and mouth agape. Camilla's head rolled back and rested between her shoulder blades. The twins' wails echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Amelia looked toward the sliding glass doors into the thick woods that sat just out back. Nestled in the shadows and crouched beneath the leaves of a pokewood shrub sat a young girl staring back at her. "Now I am wearing the red dress, Mother," Amelia giggled, popped a few berries into her mouth, and danced under the blood that rained down from Camilla's throat.